welcome.
Thank you.
We're here to talk about producing. So you just premiered your film, Mickey and the Bear, just this week. And it's the first film of yours as a producer, first feature. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling actually very good and very zen. The movie has played really well. People have really responded to it. Annie and I always say we didn't really care if people liked the movie as much as if they reacted to the movie. And luckily the reactions have also been positive. So now it's just like that role of trying to sell it and all the other things. But the movie we feel great about.
Did you guys set expectations going into the festival of what, you said you want people to react to it, but from a sales and selling standpoint, the market's really tough right now for independent films, and your film is a challenging subject. Tell us first just a minute about what the film's about.
So Mickey and the Bear is about a 17-year-old girl growing up with her dad in Montana, and her dad is a war veteran suffering from PTSD and some opioid issues that come along with that. And it's really about their relationship and the codependency between them and her decision that she has to make about whether she's going to stay and take care of her dad, or if she's going to sort of fulfill her own destiny. I think Annie, the director, and I really understand who this movie was made for. And it's really, obviously young women are a huge part of it. I always said when we were pitching it that I wish this movie was made when I was growing up so I could watch it with my mom to talk about all of these issues of toxic masculinity and also what it's like growing up as a young woman and the issues you face that people don't talk about. In terms of expectations with the distributor, for us it's always been who gets the movie, how do they want to release it, and why, and how do they want to reach that audience. And I think that we didn't set huge expectations about whether it was going to be a certain company or anything like that. It was really about how do we get the most people to see the movie.
You had not issues, but you were, and as happens to most of us, you were you had momentum with the project going and shooting, and then you hit a snag with both casting and then with financing, and you hit these places where, what do? Do you just recast? Do you keep going? How do you find more money and want to keep your momentum? And I'd love for you to talk about, in those moments when you hit that, how did you kind of then, reset and keep going and not just put a pin in a project? You really kept pushing that project and tried to stay on the timeline as best as you could. And so, it's our job as producers to kind of pick up the pieces, but it's hard too because we're just as disappointed when those things happen. And so, talk to me about those moments in the process.
Yeah, well, there was a moment about 2 months before we actually went into production and about 4 weeks before we were originally supposed to go into production, where we lost an investor, I lost a producing partner, we lost our lead actress, everything kind of, the castle crumbled around us. And it was just me and Annie in a room being okay, what do we do now? And I think we just slowly but surely looked for the answers. We're okay, how do we put this financing piece back in? How do we find our new lead? And we went back to our tapes. We went back through sort of all the people we'd been talking to. I think a very important moment for me actually was I talked to you on the phone and I was telling you about how everything fell apart, but it was coming together in this new way. And I think that, this happens all the time with movies. And you asked me a really important question. You said to me, okay, this is great that you're pulling it together, but ask yourself, is this still the movie you wanted to make? Or is it just the version you could figure out? And that really, we were I think a week from pre-pro, and it still really gave me pause where I was okay, I really have to think about this. Is this still the movie we want to make? But it really was. And in fact, it was an even better version of that film. I'm so thankful that we ended up working with Cami Marone as Mickey. She's a superstar and incredible. And the DP we ended up having and the production team and my team of financiers, it came together in the right way, though unexpected. And I think why we were able to do that is because Annie and I were so aligned in our vision for the movie, and we just so knew what it needed to be, and neither of us were willing to compromise on that just for a timeline. So yeah, it's that clarity of vision and just this and the grind together, I think, are the two things that kept it going.
Well, and you guys have a really great relationship, and I think that a lot of times when these things happen and things fall apart, the director kind of looks at the producer and it's we'll figure it out. you know, and then they go back and they pout and they stomp their feet and they wait and they're anxious and it's all on you. But you guys really did come together. And so talk about the producer-director relationship. What does that mean to you? How do you feel they can evolve very successfully? Like, what do you feel like you've put into that relationship to make it work? And vice versa with her.
Well, I think for me and Annie, we're very committed to working together, and we definitely see each other as partners in the process. And I think Annie grew up in the industry, and I think through watching her parents' experiences, it gave her a special insight into how valuable it is to have somebody in your corner just representing you and your project's interests. And that's what I think directors sometimes lose track of. They think it's just their baby and just them against the world, and that everyone else is kind of like servicing them, but not that there's any, they tend to not share that ownership, I think, enough. And I think not just with me, Annie did this with like everyone who participated in the movie. It was really like all of our project together. And in terms of our relationship, we worked really hard to develop the workflow that we have and the trust that we have. It was a lot of like open conversations about like, you know, if one of us was feeling like I guess the most like the easiest example is, you know, when you're going on all these financing meetings, right? It's always like a conversation like, who's going on the meeting? Is it just the director? Is it just the producer? Is it both of you together? And I think Annie and I weren't afraid to like cover all of those topics in an open setting and really hash it out and listen to each other. Because there were definitely times where it was appropriate for me to go in, or it was appropriate for her to go in, or for us to go together. And it was always intentional. And I think our partnership, we've always seen as we're equals. So it took a lot of work, honestly. It just takes a ton of work and an open dialogue. But when you can get there with somebody, because now we just share a brain. Now it's just all completely secondhand to us. But yeah, it took, like, we worked on this project. I joined the project in like 2015, 2016. So it was years of work of us like really learning how to work with each other.
Question you might not want to be asked, but in the market right now, it's very hard to sell indie films, and we're seeing kind of coming out of Sundance, there's, you know, yes, Amazon spent $46 million, but no one else really spent anything. And, you know, have you guys talked about what happens if nobody comes to the table?
We have talked about that, actually, if nobody wants to buy the movie. I think that if no one wants to buy the film, we'll approach it with the same determination we had to make the film. We have the same determination to get it out into the world. You and I have talked about this before, about this, about self-distributing and producers really being able to like know how that works and it not being this like totally mysterious box that nobody can approach. So if it doesn't sell to somebody, like we will still find a way to put the movie out ourselves. It'll be on obviously a smaller scale, and we will probably have to raise some more money, but you know, we didn't make the movie to just let it fall into the ether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the reason I asked about what if nobody is interested in the film leads to kind of the next question, which is about your next film. I think so many people talk about making their first feature, and the second feature sometimes is harder because now you know better, right?
Yeah.
The same level of naivete isn't there, and it often becomes harder. And so in your career, what are you looking to do as your, not necessarily the specific project, but how are you looking to go from this experience to the next and what you're developing, and then also kind of taking, and I speak from a place of having done this myself, of having a film that didn't perform the way I had wanted to, and I took on an impact campaign for the film on my own, but then spent 4 months doing that versus developing my next film, right? Yeah. So the producer's role, you know, it was already big enough, and now with distribution changing, it's growing, so that we might now have to oversee a release or even a part of a release. Like we did have a distributor, but we decided to do something. So like balancing all these things of, if you're gonna make an indie film that you might then need to support through distribution as a producer, how do you continue to grow and get your next project off the ground?
I think that the question of growth, it's just always a question, and I kind of figure it out moment to moment. I think because this was my first movie, I honestly haven't found the balance yet. The truth is, I don't know. I think it's a mix. I'm definitely looking, you know, some people are really like, I need to find my one producing partner. I need my one entity, or like, I need assistants to delegate off to. And for me, I think what I'm trying to learn is like, when I need partners and where do I need them, Because if you bring on a partner with like no sort of like, you're like, we're just gonna do it all together. I've found now that that doesn't always work. So I think I'm just looking for my people. You know, our financiers from Mickey, I think, are people who are gonna stay in our lives for a while, want to support more of our projects, which is such like a dream relationship to have. So it's finding partners for me in developing certain things, in the distribution of something, in something going into production. The most important thing to me is to be able to maintain the back and forth with my directors and to have time for them in that, because I also think that that is my strength in a lot of ways, is being able to really like interpret what they need and what they need out of their projects. So as long as I'm doing what I know I'm good at, I think that like you can build a sort of a pool of a team of people around you that you can work with as things are needed, if that makes sense.
I speak very openly about the struggle for sustainability and the small amounts of fees we're making on these films, and even with films that are successful, it doesn't mean it's coming back to your pocket. And I work jobs still all the time. How are you sustaining a living, while doing these independent films?
Sustaining a living is very tough. I try to take on commercial work where I can. I also like freelance in the world of commercials and music videos as a producer. I'm also trying to raise bits of development money for things so that I can pay myself, not like nothing close to a day rate. Like it probably works out to like $1 an hour for like that year I worked on it. But just like, you're like, okay, we're gonna raise this small development fund and I'm gonna pay myself this amount so my rent is just covered this month. And so I don't have to worry about that, and I can just really focus on what I'm doing. And I think you have to figure out as a producer how to live within your means too. It's not just about like finding how to make money. It's like, how do I adjust my lifestyle so that I can live with a small overhead? And I think something that's super important to me with sustainability is keeping a low overhead. I think I've watched certain producers and companies expand really fast and like get big offices and hire a bunch of people when there just isn't enough going on to warrant it. They just think that like that's what makes them legitimate in a way. So yeah, I think sustainability comes down to knowing how, like, being very specific about the budget of your life and living within your means, and then picking up work as you can, finding creative ways to put a little money in your bank account.
Have you ever hit a breaking point where you just really question what you're doing or want to quit, or have you not been in it long enough?
Like once a week? I'm like, what am I doing?
I mean, really, because like I said earlier, the producer's job is to pick up the pieces and be the motivator and keep everyone positive, even for those of us that aren't naturally those kind of people. But we get, all these obstacles hurt, they're painful for us too, and it's really hard to kind of keep going. And so what happens for you in those moments, or what do you do, or what do you turn to, or what do you go to inspire you again?
There's a few things that help keep me going. One is like I'm really lucky that I'm just very close with the directors I work with, and I think that they believe in me in the way that I believe in them. So, when you watch people have faith in you, it gives you like a fire to keep going. Other things that keep me going, watching a great movie, honestly. When you go to the theater and you have like an incredible film experience watching something and you just like feel it like get deep down inside of you, it reminds you about what you want to do and how what you're doing changes people. If you create work that's impactful, that's the thing we all really want, right? Is for people to sit and watch our movie and to feel that. So when you have that experience, it's a good reminder of why you're doing what you're doing. But right now, I think because I'm like newer in it, I'm not so like taken down by like oh God. But then I like think about life in 5 years and I'm like, what does that look like? And I look at like the producers who are like a few years ahead of me, 5-10 years ahead of me, and look at their lives and I'm like, okay, is like that what I want? And I think everyone kind of eventually finds a path for themselves. People like love to ask this question. They're like, what producer do you want to be like? And the only answer is I want to be the producer that I'm going to be, and I don't know what that looks like totally. So I think it's a winding journey. I think, I also have parents who've switched careers a few times in their lives, and like my mom, the career she has now, she started like in her later 30s. So I don't think it's such a straight path, and I think as long as you remember that, that you're on like the journey of life, not just like the next movie, you can kind of keep your wits about you.
Yes, it's hard. I find that we work movie to movie in that paycheck to paycheck mentality.
Yeah.
And so it's good that you have kind of the big picture road looking ahead.
Well, I have good people
It's
to
hard.
remind me.
Yeah, it's hard to do that. And I think you kind of, yeah. So in that sense, what does success mean to you? What does it look like to you?
I think what's important is that I stay happy. I think if I ever find that I'm not happy doing this, and not like day to day happy, but like truly like in the scheme of life happy, then I need to do something else, because I don't think anything is worth doing if it's making you miserable and taking you down. And I don't want to end up somewhere where I look behind me and I'm like, wow, I just like, if I just would have like changed something, I could have like lived a happy life. So that's like the main thing for me. But I want to make great films and work with great people and have a good time doing it. I hate those stories you hear about sets that are like terrible and miserable, but they made this great piece of art. I just don't think that's worth it. I don't think that that's how, especially on an independent level where everybody's working for cheap. Like, not just the producer. I mean, in the scheme of the years, like, yes, we get like a very small piece, but everybody's, is putting in their time and is there because they care about the project. So making great films and giving people great experiences that they can come back to you in like 6 months, 5 years, whatever it is, and be like, that thing we did together is like something I will never forget and keeps me going in my career. I want to give those experiences to people just as much as I want to make great work.
What do you think is the most important quality a producer needs to have?
I think as a producer, you need to be really honest. I think you need to be honest with your director, with your financiers, with yourself. I find that there's sometimes a trend towards like rewriting the narrative in a way that rewriting is wrong. Some people just lie. Some people just straight up lie. And I think as a producer, like if you don't hold yourself to that truth, who else will? And hand in hand with that is just the perseverance, is just like you are the vessel that has to keep everything going, and in keeping everything going, though, it's not just about like smiling through the bad stuff. It's also about being transparent about the bad stuff and being like, this is not great, guys, but like we're going to keep going and we're going to do it. We're going to get it done. And you have to, the metaphor I like to use about producing is like you build the ship so that the director can sort of take the wheel and drive it off. But if like the ship isn't built properly, it's not going anywhere. So that's I guess a kind of like roundabout way of just being like, you have to be honest, you have to persevere and just be transparent with everybody, be a leader.